Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game, a game that seems like a beautiful dream just now. I'm Kevin Day, and of course, talking of beautiful dreams, I'm joined virtually by a football finance expert at Liverpool University, Kieran Maguire. How are you, Kieran?
I'm very good, Kevin. Thank you very much. Staying indoors apart from my daily dog walk.
I don't know why that made me laugh so much. It had the word dog in it, and yeah, you are staying indoors, but you're still all over the media, though, aren't you? 10 to 1 in the morning on Talk Sport.
Yes. I was asked to speak on the Paul Ross show. Yesterday was the Doncaster Free Press, which for me was a dream come true. To get my name splashed around, and it's Radio Humberside tonight.
Oh, you tart! And where's the Baroness while you're talking to Paul Ross at 10 to 1 in the morning?
She's strumming. I think she's not impressed with me with me sort of setting up alarm clocks for silly o'clock in the morning.
What, you set the alarm clock to get up at 10 to 1? You weren't still up at 10 to 1, surely?
No. It's far too exciting a time for me.
Really? Oh. Yeah. Now, later in this episode, Kieran, you'll be talking on the phone. It's just you because we had technical issues. You'll be talking to Dover Athletic goalkeeper Lee Worgan about what life is like at the moment for clubs in the National League, the fifth tier of English football. And if we miss watching it, I guess they must really miss playing it.
Very much so. Lee was very articulate. I think he was very reasoned in the views that he put forward. But it is a time for great uncertainty, and I appreciate that's the case for many people outside of the world of football as well. The football is a much bigger industry than perhaps we realise, and there's so much focus on the Premier League. But in non-league football, it's a pretty tough gig. There's lots of matches to be played, and there's no cash to go around at present.
Yeah. Okay. So before you talk to Lee, we do have some cracking stories, which I think some of our listeners may have missed in the crisis. Now, first of all, and I think it's fair to say we didn't quite see this one coming. The EFL has lost a bunch of cases just recently, haven't they?
That's right. I mean, the EFL have been investigating clubs and individuals, but if you take a look at what has happened, is that the appeals and the charges haven't necessarily gone the way that they would have hoped. So Bolton had a 5-point suspended deduction, which was in respect of matches that were not played. There was a match at the end of 2018-19 and a couple of matches that weren't played this season because the administrators said at the time, we've only got a bunch of kids and we just don't think it's good for their mental health playing professional football Saturday, Tuesday. So there was a 5-point suspended penalty given. This was on top of the 12-point deduction for going into administration. But the EFL appealed against the 5-point suspension, saying it was too lenient. But they were knocked back, and they've had to accept that the judgment panel believe that to be fair.
Who selects this judgment panel?
It's an independent panel. That they try to get people that are not involved on football on a day-to-day basis. So it will be a barrister, it will be somebody from an administrative background that's got an understanding of the law and so on. So the people involved are not going to be biased either towards or against the club.
Right. Okay.
So that was the first one. Then Macclesfield, they had a 6-point deduction given. That was in December, but actually looking at the small print, it was a 10-point deduction. This was because they failed to fulfil fixtures, partly due to the fact that they hadn't paid the players' wages. Now, 4 of those points were suspended. Again, that went to appeal, and the appeal committee decided to reduce the penalty, and this time they knocked it down from 6 points to 4 points. Now, given that Macclesfield are very close to the trapdoor in League Two, this is a significant benefit to them. I think the guy in charge of Stevenage has been very diplomatic in his comments, because Stevenage are the side at the bottom of League Two who are at the greatest risk to be relegated to the National League. But I think Stevenage people aren't happy with the reduction in that penalty. And then finally, a couple of weeks ago, and this came through at 10:30 on a Friday night. This was direct from Sheffield Wednesday. There had been charges against Delphon Chansiri, who's the club owner, John Redgate, who's the finance director, and the former chief executive, Katrina Mir, that they had been charged by the EFL for misconduct. And all of a sudden, apparently, those charges have been very quickly dropped. So I think Sheffield Wednesday fans in particular have seen this as a positive sign, because although there are charges against the club as well as the executives, I think they're drawing a positive viewpoint that if the charges aren't going to go ahead against the people running the club, then they've got a greater chance of being successful in their appeal against the financial fair play penalties, which could be up to 21 points. And I'm sure, therefore, Derby County fans will also be listening to what's happening with regards to these charges and the fact that they have been diluted, because Derby are up on a charge as well.
Do you think this is going to make it less likely in future that the EFL will attempt penalties like this if they're going to get knocked back so easily on appeal?
Well, I mean, it could be that the EFL might be seeing the 3 which we've discussed to date as pre-season friendlies, and the ones against Sheffield Wednesday and Derby are the big ones that they have done an awful lot of research on. I think both sides feel very confident with regards to what's taken place in respect of the conduct of the club and the people investigating, but I don't think anything can really take place in the future. In the short term, because clearly you can't have a judgment panel conducting itself virtually, when I think both sides of the law will be wanting to put together further documentation, and they can't do that because they can't check out each other's documents, and they can't send things as easy as they would do under normal circumstances. So I think this one might be kicked down the road a bit until some form of normality returns.
So glimmers of hope, you say, for Sheffield Wednesday and Derby fans. Charlton Athletic, less so. All was sweetness and light at Charlton Athletic, wasn't it, for about 3 days? And now it's a full-blown civil war.
Well, that's right. I mean, the former owner, Roland de Chachelet, he was pretty unpopular with fans. And when the club was sold to is it East Street Investments, there was celebration in the streets of that particular part of South London. There were 2 sort of new owners. One got a guy called Matt Southall, who I think is a former agent, and I think the main money was supposed to be coming from a Syrian investor called Tanoun Namir. Now, I think the first signs that things weren't very great was that Charlton fans were expecting that with the new owners would come an investment in the January transfer window. And that never materialised. And by all accounts, the reason for that was that the EFL were looking for proof of funding coming from Mr. Ninir. And that didn't seem to materialise. So on the back of that, the EFL said, well, we're not going to allow you to sign players because you've not proven that you've got the money to carry the club forwards for the next couple of years. Since then, the 2 people at the top of the club have clearly fallen out, and Mr. Namir started posting some stuff on Instagram, and these were allegedly references to the spending by Matt Southall in terms of some expensive cars, an expensive flat. I think it was £12,000 a month rent being paid for an apartment, and then there's a real ding dong taking place between the two people involved. Lots of accusations. I think Mr. Southall has now been relieved of his duties as a director, but I think he's trying to appeal that. And the last thing that I saw coming from the local press in South London was that Mr. Namir was saying, well, I'm going to put money into the club in April, but there's a couple of other directors involved at Charlton who are the former directors. They claim that they're owed £7 million by Mr. Namir, and they've not received the money, and they're going to be counterclaiming against him. So it's a real hodgepodge that's taking place at present.
It just shows you how volatile the finances are in football, Kieran, as we're learning week in, week out. But when this takeover was first happening, and we were talking about how delighted Charlton fans would be to have cast off Du Châtelet, it all seemed to be above board. It all seemed to be that they were following the EFL rules and regulations and fit and proper personnel. And then suddenly this almost came out of nowhere, didn't it?
That's right. I mean, the fit and proper test, it sort of has two elements to it. The first of which is, are you an outstanding criminal? Do you have a conviction which is unlapsed at present? And as I think we've discussed that practically anybody is going to pass that particular test. And there's a second set of rules that you have to go through, and these are more strict. And this is looking into the financial background of the individuals concerned to see whether or not they have sufficient money to allow the club to pay its debts. And I think this is what caused the EFL to have some concerns, to have some reservations, and things have deteriorated since then.
I think, just to clarify, what Kieran means is, do they have an outstanding criminal record rather than are they an outstanding criminal?
Yes.
So that's a slightly unsavoury story. The next one is, it's just terrible that it's still running. There's some news on the Emiliano Sala transfer fee. And this is a story where there seem to be a lot of people who are probably legally right, but morally not so. It should have been done and dusted this a long time ago, shouldn't it?
Well, yes, and I think we've both expressed our reservations with the way that the clubs have conducted themselves. We're talking about a 28-year-old young man whose life has been tragically lost. Clearly, that's implications for his family and everybody that was friends and family, friends and who loved him. But the sort of the words that are coming out, and if I give you the actual wording here from the Cardiff City accounts, in respect of an ongoing contractual dispute with another football club that arose in January 2019, the club has lodged an appeal with CAS. So Emiliano Sala doesn't get a mention. The selling club doesn't get a mention. It's just so incredibly impersonal. And then you look into what the club has then gone on to say is, we're very confident, having taken legal advice, that we've got good prospects of success. Now, if that's the case, then you would think that Cardiff wouldn't do anything in respect of the transfer fee of Emiliano Sala. Yeah. But then when you drop into the small print of the accounts, what they've done is that they've actually put through an expected cost of £19.5 million. So they're saying one thing in one part of the accounts and they're doing something else in another. Now, I don't want to sound unduly cynical, but if you put those costs through in the year in which Cardiff were part of the Premier League, in the Premier League, you're allowed a £35 million financial fair play loss. If that had been deferred to when they're in the Championship, you're only allowed £13 million. So, the cynic would say that Cardiff are actually accelerating Emiliano Sala's cost simply to ensure that they're in a stronger financial fair play position. And if that is the case, I think that doesn't reflect particularly well on the game.
Well, you talked about contradictory information because one part of the club, at least, are claiming that he possibly didn't sign the registration document, which is one of the reasons they're using as an excuse to not pay the money. And quite frankly, what annoys me is that both clubs, Cardiff and not, should have just come to an agreement, put the money in a pot, give it to the foundation they've set up in Salah's name, give some money as well to the family of the pilot of the helicopter, because that's something else I find very uncomfortable, the fact that they're trying to shift so much of the blame onto the pilot. He was colourblind, he shouldn't be flying at night, etc. Like, he's lost his life, his family as devastated, and that's kind of a side issue that needs to be dealt with by the police, really. They shouldn't be using that as an excuse to not resolve this tawdry financial issue.
That's very much the case, and I agree with you entirely. We are caught in this football bubble. There were two people who lost their life that day, and there's two sets of grieving families. I think the way that the clubs have tried to manipulate the media and control the narrative with regard to this, both Nantes and Cardiff, doesn't show that they are thinking about the bigger issues here. A lot of people have been upset by what's happened, and rightly so. And football, we have seen, can act as a force for good. And I think both clubs, as you rightly said, could have done something very positive here to help alleviate the pain that people are going through. But that doesn't appear to have been the case, and they're too busy squabbling over a cheque.
We talk about football doing some good. Gary Neville's been getting a lot of praise, and rightly so, for some of his altruistic gestures during this crisis. But Salford City have been coming under the spotlight of the club that he co-owns. Their finances have been looked at.
Well, yeah, I mean, Salford City have come up from the National League North, and now they've been promoted from the National League into League Two, and that's terrific. I'm all for the nature of the football pyramid, and the way that clubs can accede from one division to another is great, because it gives everybody hope. I think what's caused a lot of resentment amongst non-league clubs is that I managed to get hold of Salford's accounts for last year, and as you know, when that is the case, I tend to get a little bit excited, and the big magnifying glass comes out, and it looks as if Salford lost around about £2.5 million. And if you look at the amount of money that they were spending on players, their transfer budget was bigger than, I think, 23 out of 24 clubs in League Two, which is the football pyramid above. So I think that takes a bit of the gloss off the achievements. And there's always resentment in football and whataboutery and so on between fans, but it's certainly given that the fans of other clubs in the National League ammunition to perhaps of a criticism of the method by which Salford have got through the leagues, and they'll be pointing out that the attendances at Salford aren't perhaps as good as you would expect them to be. Having said that, they're an embryonic club. They are in the shadow of the two big Manchester clubs, and it is difficult to get people to switch allegiances or to suddenly decide they're going to watch lower division football.
It's I know it's something that a friend of this show, the Accrington chairman, Andy Holt, has been quite vocal about. But on the other side of it, it also proves that it's virtually impossible in modern football, at whatever level, to get success without some kind of investment. And it's part of me that I understand everything that you say, but there's also part of me that thinks you shouldn't really resent a club if there is investment available. Then fair play to them. Yeah,
I mean, people have stuck their hands in their pockets, and they've invested in a project, and on the back of that, the local fans who were very much sort of two men and a dog 5 years ago.
Yeah.
They've got a bit of glamour. Nobody when they started supporting Salford City would expect to see themselves on BBC documentaries and Sky Sports documentaries. And now the ground has been improved in terms of the infrastructure, and they're seeing a quality of football that they wouldn't have anticipated. So there are always positives, and we have to be realistic, as you rightly said. You don't get anywhere in football on a shoestring unless there's very exceptional circumstances, and those clubs that do get promoted on very low budgets, they have a habit of not surviving too long in the higher divisions.
So you've had your big magnifying glass out at Salford, which I presume is the same big magnifying glass that the Baroness uses, but let's draw a veil over that. The floodlights have been opened on Spurs' finances, haven't they, really? This is, it's the opposite end to the Salford City scale, but it's some rather eye-opening stuff coming out of Tottenham.
Well, that's right. I mean, Spurs are a very successful club. So, as far as the Premier League is concerned, I think over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, I think Spurs have made more profit than anybody else. I think there was a lot of people saying that they felt that Spurs would struggle to finance the new stadium, and the cost of the new stadium has been greater than anticipated. It's come to over £1 billion, I think, between the new White Hart Lane and the investment they've made in the training ground facilities. And talking to some people in the game, they say the facilities are off the scale in terms of what is available to players from a training perspective. So there's been this huge investment. At the same time, they managed to turn in a profit of £113 million last year. I think that's the highest of any club in the Premier League. They're only paying £39 in wages for every £100 that comes through the door. That's the lowest in the Premier League. So all of these seem to be positives. And then we had the announcement that Spurs were going to furlough 550 non-playing staff, and effectively, that they're going to use the taxpayer as a means of funding their non-playing staff. Now, if you then start to crunch the numbers, 550 people, let's say that they're on an average of 30 grand a year, and I don't think that's excessive. You've got lots of people working in the back offices on reasonable but not high income. The furloughing rules are there for 3 months, so that works out as the cost to the club for employing those 550 people is £3.3 million for over a 3-month period. Daniel Levy, who is the Spurs CEO. Now, Daniel is a very, very smart guy. Nobody's denying that. Last year, he got a salary of £3 million and he got a bonus of £4 million on top of that. So he's now the highest paid executive in English football. His bonus would cover the 3 months, which is effectively going to be paid by the taxpayer.
I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn that even at a Premier League club, there are 550 salaried staff. But what surprises me about this is because there are Premier League clubs who are trying, Palace being one of them, to keep paying staff as long as possible. Just in terms of PR, and they obviously don't care. We saw what happened to Mike Ashley and sort of by default Newcastle with what he's been trying to do. And these are the sort of things that fans will remember when this is over, isn't it?
Yes, I think Spurs have done what they are legally entitled to do.
Of course.
And perhaps, again, this is the romantic in us, if other companies of a similar size are doing it, why are we singling them out? Is it because we as fans, we expect more of football clubs than we do if it was a company that was making light bulbs, for example? I genuinely don't know. So is there an element of double standards towards Spurs? But given the amount of money in the very top of the game, and certainly, as people will find out when they listen to our chat with Lee Worgan from Dover, that money does not cascade down into the National League. But there's no resentment from the lower league players, that they accept where they are. I think there's a feeling that Spurs haven't exactly conducted themselves in a very smart manner with the pronouncements that came out from Daniel, because this was on the day that the accounts were published when his £7 million salary or £7 million pay for last year was being touted. At the same time, we can't afford to pay people in the back office.
It's not resentment as such. It's disappointment, and it's the hope that anybody who has that sort of money available would act in a more altruistic fashion is what it is. When my industry, the entertainment industry, the Edinburgh Festival has been cancelled today, people will be struggling for a long time, and you'd like to think that people who are not struggling financially would do as much as they possibly can. So it's not just Tottenham Football Club. I've got a great deal of respect for Spurs. They're a fine club. It's any organisation that acts in the same way, especially, as you say, on the day they announce how much money they've actually got.
Yes, I think it's it's poor juxtaposition of two events.
Yeah.
And they've not come out of it very well. And it does allow the people that like to have a pop at football clubs, it's just giving them free ammunition, because there are far wealthier organisations in the world than football clubs who are making an absolute fortune out of the pandemic through short selling, through manipulation of prices of commodities and gouging prices for drugs and things of this nature. We do live in this football bubble, but have a little bit more forethought if you are going to be doing something of this nature on the same day as announcing £113 million worth of profit.
Yeah, and at the other end of the economic scale is Dover Athletic in the National League. Because of technical issues, which my son wouldn't wake up to fix, Kieran spoke to Lee Worgan from Dover Athletic alone. And let's have a listen to that interview now.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Lee has played over 630 games, according to Wikipedia, but they've not detailed the number of games he played for Eastbourne Borough, apparently. He's not scored any goals. I suspect that's something to do with being a goalkeeper. But welcome very much to the show, Lee. First of all, how are you getting on in this crazy time in which we're living? How are you coping with being cooped up 24 hours a day?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. It's difficult. I'm sure how everyone's in the same position, but you've just got to try and stay positive and get through it and utilise that one bit of exercise a day that you're allowed. And I've tried to see it as I wouldn't have had these few weeks initially before, so I get to spend time with my daughter that I wouldn't have had. And it's just a case of trying to stay positive and get through it. But it's testing times, obviously. But we're all in the same position.
Absolutely. And are you in touch with the rest of the squad? Have you got WhatsApp groups? Are you using Zoom and other ways? I'd imagine some of the lads, especially the single lads, must be finding it quite tough.
I can imagine so. Yeah. Obviously, I think a massive thing about all this is trying to stay in touch with your social interaction, and in the form of WhatsApp groups, like you said, Zoom, House Party, all of these sort of platforms help you and enable us to communicate. Our WhatsApp group has been pretty busy over the last week, as you can imagine, with the various situations that have been unfolding, just not at our club, but at sort of every club within the football leagues. So it's we've been in touch backwards and forwards. And I guess that's all you can do at the moment is just try and stay in touch with people.
Absolutely. So I saw on the club website that the chairman's made a statement. He's effectively said that the club doesn't have any more cash, and I think they're looking at the furlough scheme and things of that nature. What's your position as a player? Have you been in contact with the PFA, or have you been in touch with any other authorities or advisors?
Well, this all sort of started. We were one of the last games, because obviously the National League was one of the last leagues that actually played before all the sort of the suspensions come into play. So we played at home to Chesterfield. It was a very, very strange game, because games are getting called off from the night before all through the morning, so he wasn't really sure whether he was going to play or not. We had a meeting with our chairman before the game. He made it quite clear that if football was to be suspended at our level, then finances were going to be an issue. We didn't obviously know to the extent of that until the following week. So we get paid weekly at our football club. So we got paid as of last Friday, and we then received a letter basically stating that going forward, the club don't have any funds to fulfil our contracts, obviously because they don't have the revenue streams coming in, match day income, such as sponsorship and the likes. So we were sort of left in a position where we didn't really know what was going to happen until the government retention scheme was put into place, but as we all know, it's all of the legislations with that are still very much up in the air. So we've all pretty much since agreed to go onto the furlough scheme, as I see that quite a few other clubs have done that recently. But we're literally in the hands of the government now, because the club have said that they can't contribute anything towards our wages. So like I said, for the foreseeable future, we're at the mercy of Boris and the government.
Right, absolutely, and I appreciate, as you say, that's affecting not just people in the football industry, but many industries as well. It's a time of great stress, I think, for people, and uncertainty. So. Have you been in contact with the PFA? Have they been in sort of advising the members, or have you just sort of been dealing directly with the club itself?
We've done a lot of both, really. There was myself, the management staff, our captain Kevin Locko, and our vice captain Michael Woods, who we had a Zoom video call with the chairman, and again he made it quite clear that all of the details that he said before the game against Chesterfield were going to happen. The finances weren't there. He was looking into the scheme. This was last week. And so he did tell us, whoever of us that are PFA members, because obviously the PFA only really look after the Premier League and the EFL clubs. We're, as a National League club, even though we are full-time, we're pretty much left to fend for ourselves in terms of player rights and such. So those of us that have been members in the past, the PFA have been excellent. I must say they've been very, very good in terms of any sort of contractual sort of information that they can give us, and what really what way to go with this. And then obviously others have taken advice, other legal advice. I'm in quite a fortunate position. My wife's a lawyer, so she's had a little look through what the documents are that we've been asked to sign. But again, it does boil down to the fact of if the club's got no money and they're not in a position to be able to pay you, then again you either have to sign the furlough scheme or you risk running with no money for however long that'll be.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a very practical approach that you're taking, and we hope best luck that it does get sorted out. I think everybody's hoping for some sort of recommence. Life is going to recommence at some point in time, but none of us know when that's going to be. I've noticed, and clearly the FA have made this very big announcement that all leagues below the National League are now scrapped. Do you have friends and colleagues who are in that position? Do you know what their reaction is, and what would you say if the National League itself, in terms of this season, was scrapped? I mean, looking at Dover's position, you're not out of the playoffs in terms of if you get a good run of results. So how do the players feel about the announcement from the FA?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'd like to say I wouldn't want to be in the position of having to make the decision. Obviously, it's no one's. This is an unbelievable situation that everyone finds himself in. I do think it was probably a bit hasty of the FA to completely expunge all the divisions. I've played at lower down the pyramid, the non-league pyramid. I've played at those levels, and I think it was a bit hasty, like I've already said. I've got friends who managers are in varying levels. So I've got a manager who I know very well, who I speak to quite often. His club are top. They're 6 points clear with 2 games in hand. They've invested a significant amount of money for the level that they're playing at in terms of wages, travel, and everything that they've put into it. To suddenly see their season written off. And I believe it was written off without even any form of consent. They just received an email saying that their league was no more. So I do think that was all done far too quickly. And I do think that if they were to do it at our level, I think there would be some serious ramifications of that, because obviously you've had Notts County come down, who I believe are third. Barrow, who in my opinion deserve to go up, who are top. Would they not go up? Would they lose out on close to £1 million of income from getting to the Football League, or do the Football League allow them? I think there's just so many unanswered questions, and I think whatever decision's made, I don't think anyone, not everyone's going to be happy with it.
No, I mean, I agree with you entirely. That there's bound to be winners and losers. I mean, I think in the case of Barrow, I think the least that can be done they would be promoted, because that would that at least would take the EFL back to having 92 clubs, but the clubs that would be due for a playoff place, and as you know, I look at all of the numbers in the clubs, and you've got clubs in the National League that are losing £2.5 million a year. And for that to be the case when they put all of that amount of effort in, and also from the players' point of view, you invest all that time in training. Many players are working part-time, and then they're sort of switching lives. They're giving up their evenings to go to training as well. For all of that to be suddenly taken away would seem to be very harsh.
Yeah, I think so. I think it really, it's extremely harsh. You've probably got some goal scorers there who have scored goals this season that, of numbers that they would never reach before, and all of a sudden all them records are out of the window. Like you said, you've got clubs who are going to lose a significant amount of money. And again, if you were to promote Barrow, if you're sat in the Harrogate boardroom, you're probably not very happy either, because again, there might only be 8-10 games left, but form comes into play this part of the year, and I think that that's got to have a bearing. I do feel extremely sorry for clubs that are in Barrow's position, but I think if we're going to have to run in line with the EFL, and I think the latest statement from the National League to say that our league is suspended is simply waiting for a decision from above, who, of course, the EFL are waiting for a decision above them. And I think everything stems down from what the Premier League are going to do in terms of structure, because essentially we are a pyramid starting from the Premier League, working down to step 7 or step 8 of non-league football. So to preserve the integrity of that, I think we're all going to have to sort of fall into the same sort of line, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and clearly I think the EFL, the PFA and the Premier League, I think they're having a meeting later this week where they're going to try to have some form of agreement, and that will have implications for players in the National League as well. I mean, could you see a situation whereby matches were played, effectively you were playing 2 or 3 matches a week just to get the season finished, and from your point of view as a professional athlete, isn't that going to cause issues for you? And even if the matches are played, would that be acceptable to you to play them behind closed doors when National League clubs are getting no money coming through because you're so reliant on match day?
I think what we have to remember is, as well, at our level, we've got a squad of around, I believe it's between 22 and 24. 9 of those players their contract finishes on May the 3rd or the end of April, depending on what date that their contract specifies. So potentially we could lose 9 players out of our squad, leaving us with a team of 14. So listen, we play 3 games a week in the National League for the first 2 months of the season. So in terms of fatigue on your body, we're sort of used to that level of performance. However, to do that with 14 players, are we allowed to sign players? Do the players who are out of contract, would they want to sign agreements to see them through a few months? Would that then risk injury for them? It's such there's so many unanswered questions, and it would be so difficult. I believe if we could squeeze the games in and finish the season, then that would be ideal. But at the moment we're fellow players, so we're not allowed to undertake any work. So that would mean our club then taking up our contracts again with no income. So it's extremely difficult situation that the clubs find themselves in. And I think what the disappointing thing is for players at our level is there's so much money in the Premier League. It's probably, if not, well, you'll know more than myself, probably the richest league in the world. And to see none of that funding sort of be put in place, and hopefully that might do, then to put in place to sort of help us over these few months, it's quite saddened to see, because I looked at it this morning to see the amount of players that have come through the non-league pyramid to go on and not only play in the Premier League but be England internationals. And I think that's forgotten by the Premier League clubs and the Premier League supporters, and we're sort of again left behind a little.
Yeah, I think that the points you make are very valid. I mean, I've got the numbers in front of me. The Premier League wage bill last season was over £3.1 billion. So that's a lot of money, and the clubs themselves made over £5 billion. You drop down into the National League, and everybody wants to get as high as they can. And I don't think you as a professional, you don't begrudge the players in the higher leagues earning the amounts of money that they do, but it does seem pretty harsh that that there does appear to be a lack of support for the pyramid, and the whole point about a pyramid is that the bottom of the pyramid supports the next tier up, and so on. And you'd expect, in an ideal world, for some of that to flow back down.
You would hope so. I don't begrudge anyone earning the money that they do. We play at our level, and it is tiring. It's difficult. You're having to perform every week. You're under pressure, and I can only begin to fathom what that's like. At Premier League level, with the amount of money involved and the pressure involved that those guys have to go in week out. So, listen, they're not standing there sort of demanding the money. That's just what the market value is, and that's what they get paid. So I've got no problems with people earning that level of money. I think it's more you're looking at the Premier League as a whole. If we were to just go through a few of the players, Jamie Vardy, Chris Smalling, Joe Hart, Mikel Antonio, James Tarkowski, Yannick Bolasie, these are all players that have benefited coming through the non-league pyramid and gone on to play in the Premier League. And if, for whatever reason, this government retention scheme doesn't help our level and the money doesn't filter down from the Premier League, you're going to see that those avenues closed. So that will be really, really disappointing to see, because we're not just a level that support the Premier League in terms of some players. I mean, at our club, we have a very good relationship with Tottenham. So what we have had in place is almost like a work experience scenario where the players come in and they train with us to get away from their multi-million-pound training complex and come and train at our training ground, where things are, as you can imagine, extremely different to that. So it's, there's so many relationships that could go south if there's no support in that manner.
I think you'll get the support of everybody that listens to the show in what you've just said, Lee. So I'd just like to thank you very much for coming on. B, to wish you and your family to stay safe, stay indoors, and I hope none of us catch this accursed disease. And from an outside observer's point of view, just hope you get back to some form of normality and manage to complete the season for you and yours and carry on your career.
No, let's hope so. I really appreciate you having me on, and obviously stay safe, and to you and your family in these times.
Cheers, Lee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's fascinating stuff, Kieran. I mean, what sort of vibe did you get about his mood and about how this will all unfold?
Well, Lee was very positive. I think he was very realistic. He as he's played over 600 games in football, so I think he's seen the good and the bad in the game. I think he just reflected the club itself. Whether it should pay, it physically couldn't pay because in the National League you've got nothing coming in apart from your match day income. So no matches means that there's no money for not just the players. There's no money for the programme seller. There's no money for Doris the tea lady and so on. I thought he gave an excellent representation of where he is, and also I think what was very good, the importance of the football pyramid to the game as a whole. Also
indicates as well, we were talking about this before we actually started recording, because you and I have a hinterland. We have a chat before we start recording, don't we? I like to know what's happening outside your window, in your Disneyland countryside paradise. You like to know how many cars are going past my inner city. What I think we're forgetting, all this talk about the Premier League last week, the EFL talking about taking teams off to remote training camps so the season can be finished, and Sky will film it and there'll be a game every 3 hours. It will take 4 weeks after this ends for the players to get fit again, is what people are forgetting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not a case of just flicking a switch and football returns. The players are in isolation. They are elite athletes. You wouldn't expect Usain Bolt to just rock up, up to an athletics meeting having done no training for a month or 2 months, and exactly the same in respect of football. So the players are going to need time, and you'll have the sports scientists and you'll have the conditioning experts wanting that 3 weeks to be 4 weeks, or however it is, however long before the matches return after some form of semblance of normality returns to our life. And I think you'll have the authorities and the TV companies pressing for that time to be kept as short as possible.
Mm. Well, also from a financial point of view, I imagine insurers will want to make sure that players are fully fit, because the chances are that somebody gets an injury they may not have got and an insurance company is not going to be happy to pay out for it.
Absolutely, and there's the players themselves. I think that they have to be taken into consideration because many of them will have contracts which expire on the 30th of June, and many others of them will have contracts which trigger a 1-year extension. Normally, that kicks in based on the number of appearances they've had by the 1st of April or the 1st of May. So there's lots of complications here, and the more you delve into it, the more questions than answers appear. The EFL, the Premier League, and the PFA, they're all meeting, and I think they're going to try to have some form of united front, which has to be applauded if that does take place, with a view as to how the game is going to go forwards. But ultimately, and I think we're all in agreement with this, is that anything which takes people away from frontline emergency services cannot be countenanced until the pandemic is brought under control.
Yeah, quite right too. Sadly, football won't be back for a while, but we will be back on Monday with our question special. If you have questions for that, we always have plenty, trust me, but we're always willing to take more. It's questions@priceoffootball.com, and The Price of Football is a DAP-DIP production. Thanks, Kieran. See you Monday, mate. Well, I won't see you Monday, unfortunately. I'll see you on a grainy screen. But,
Absolutely. Take care and stay indoors, folks.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.